Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 10 Part 68 based on novel. So let's start. Demonic aura surged while the seventh seat king stood in the sky. Meanwhile, there was an icy cold metallic glow on his fearsome devil emperor armor. At the same time, a rich and brutal bloodthirsty sensation slowly spread from his body. His frightening pressure caused one's heart to pound even faster. 8,000 purple gold dragon-like tattoos were currently circling around Lin Dong's body, while ancient dragon roars sounded. Meanwhile, among his two eyes, one of them was black, while the other was silver. It was an exceptionally strange sight. Bang! Lin Dong's body once again rushed forward at this moment. Waving both his hands, they directly transformed into an enormous purple gold dragon claw, before he ruthlessly swiped at the seventh seat king. However, when the seventh seat king saw Lin Dong's fearsome attack, a derisive glint flashed across his eyes. Then, he did not move at all, as he allowed that dragon claw attack, which could easily flatten a mountain range, to land on his body. A clear metallic sound appeared. However, the seventh seat king did not budge at all. In fact, there wasn't even a single scar on his devil emperor armor. After which, he smiled faintly as he looked at Lin Dong, before the derision in his eyes became increasingly intense. Finally, he extended his finger, which was also clad in black armor, before he pressed on the empty space. A demonic light shot directly from his finger. After which, it flew towards that dragon claw, which was agglomerated from 8,000 purple gold dragon-like tattoos, before it tore that claw apart. If that's all you've got, the seventh seat king smiled. However, he quickly saw a figure being reflected within his eyes. Moreover, one of his arms was currently in liquid form, and there was lightning glow cracking and black light gathering within that liquidized arm. In fact, it was even vaguely possible to see two ancient symbols floating within. You are actually able to control the ancestral symbol's strength to such an extent. A faint tinge of shock finally flashed across the seventh seat king's eyes. Immediately, he quickly clenched his fist before he threw a punch forward. He did not use any fancy moves. Instead, he only used a massive amount of force that could seemingly annihilate anything. Boom! That liquidized punch collided head-on with the devil fist, which was covered by the devil emperor armor. Instantly, the surrounding space seemingly caved in. Following which, demonic aura spluttered before Lin Dong was once again forcefully pushed back. However, Lin Dong suddenly swung his sleeve just as he was being pushed back. Then, a light shot out before it instantly expanded with the wind and turned into a huge stone tablet. Meanwhile, there were ancient ripples being emitted from that stone tablet. Great Desolate Tablet? The seventh seat king was startled when he saw that stone tablet. Soon after, he shook his head and said, "I never expected such a divine object to be in your possession as well. Unfortunately, it seems like the Great Desolate Tablet has yet to recover its full strength. Otherwise, I might be in a little trouble today." While he spoke, the Great Desolate Tablet brought along monstrous lights, before it ruthlessly smashed towards the seventh seat king. Meanwhile, there was a huge ancient light formation hovering below the tablet. However, Lin Dong did not stop after he unleashed the Great Desolate Tablet. He flicked his finger before a seven-colored rainbow appeared. Then, the mysterious divine palace showed up as well. That palace shook before a torrent of divine objects whizzed forward and gushed towards the seventh seat king. Mysterious divine palace. When the seventh seat king saw the mysterious divine palace, he laughed once again. He had never expected that Lin Dong was actually in possession of two of the top 10 divine objects on the ancient divine object ranking. You indeed possess countless techniques. However, they are all useless. The seventh seat king smiled, before an icy cold color suddenly appeared in his eyes. After which, he lifted his arm before he directly blocked the Great Desolate Tablet that was smashing towards him. Then, he lifted his foot before he kicked the torrent of divine objects that was rushing towards him. Immediately, countless divine objects were shattered into dust due to his overwhelming force. Bang bang! The seventh seat king laughed out loud towards the sky. Then, fist shadows whizzed forward, before heavy punches rained down on the Great Desolate Tablet, forcing it to retreat continuously. Meanwhile, the torrent of divine objects from the mysterious divine palace was also completely blocked by him. Clad in the Devil Emperor armor, the seventh Seat King was so incredibly powerful that it nearly defied logic. Lin Dong looked at the seventh Seat King, who managed to block the attacks from the Great Desolate Tablet and the mysterious divine palace, before his eyes became increasingly grave. Soon after, he inhaled a deep breath of air, before he slowly shut both of his eyes. However, soon after, a glowing line emerged between his brows, before it slowly split apart. After that glowing line split apart, an incredibly mysterious eye appeared between Lin Dong's brows. It was actually the eye of the ancestral symbol. The seventh Seat King's pupils became focused after he saw the eye of the ancestral symbol. Immediately, he exclaimed, "Eye of the ancestral symbol." The aura around Lin Dong's body was quickly withdrawn. Promptly, the ancestral symbol eye between his brows became increasingly resplendent. In the next instant, he suddenly opened both of his tightly shut eyes. The glow from within the ancestral symbol eye became extremely intense after Lin Dong opened his eyes. Subsequently, a ray of light filled with black light and lightning glow suddenly shot forward. That ray of light was extremely mysterious, and it was seemingly covered with countless tiny ancient symbols. Meanwhile, there was an extremely frightening fluctuation being emitted from that seemingly feeble-looking light. That ray of light penetrated the empty space instantly. In the blink of an eye, it had reached the seventh Seat King. Subsequently, it ruthlessly shot onto his chest. Bang! A dazzling bright light spread along with an energy assault wave. However, soon after, that light gradually died down. After which, one saw that the seventh Seat King was still standing tall in the sky. Nonetheless, a crack had appeared on the chest plate of his Devil Emperor armor. When Lin Dong saw this scene, his expression changed involuntarily. After all, he had never expected that even after he activated the eye of the ancestral symbol, he was only able to leave a crack on the Devil Emperor armor. Just how frightening was this item? The seventh Seat King lowered his head to look at the crack on his chest. Then, the expression in his eyes became extremely gloomy. Clearly, he was extremely furious with the fact that Lin Dong had damaged his Devil Emperor armor. After all, this item was bestowed to him by his emperor, and any damage on it was a source of humiliation to them. You should have had your fun. The smile on the seventh Seat King's face completely vanished. Promptly, he took a step forward before his body immediately appeared in front of Lin Dong, as though he had teleported. Finally, he flipped his hand before he furiously struck towards Lin Dong. Roar! 8,000 purple gold dragon light tattoos soared before they transformed into a massive purple gold dragon and collided with the seventh Seat King. However, at the moment of impact, the purple gold light was shattered and the massive purple gold dragon was forcefully ripped apart. Lin Dong took this opportunity to retreat. However, that incoming erosive powerful assault wave still caused him to emit a muffled sound from his throat. Clad in the Devil Emperor armor, the seventh Seat King was simply too powerful. After he pushed Lin Dong back with a single palm attack, murderous aura erupted within the eyes of the seventh Seat King. Clearly, he did not want to prolong the fight. His body moved before he once again caught up. Then, he swung his devil fist before monstrous demonic aura surged. Bang bang bang. The two people in the sky once again clashed violently. However, it was clear that Lin Dong had currently fell into a disadvantage. After all, the Devil Emperor armor clad by the seventh Seat King was extremely powerful. In fact, even though he used the strength of the ancestral symbols previously, he could not deal much damage to the latter. On the other hand, he had to be extremely cautious when dealing with the latter's attacks. In fact, if it was not because he had the primal dragon bone, it was likely that he would have been seriously wounded. Despite so, he was still in a pretty bad state. Bang! Another violent clash occurred. Lin Dong felt a sweet sensation rush up his throat before a mouthful of blood gushed into his mouth. Then, he forcefully spat them out. Meanwhile, his eyes became increasingly brutal. There are so many treasures on your body. If your physical body is enhanced a little further, it might be comparable to the Chaos Masters. Unfortunately, I am not interested in keeping an enemy with such potential. The seventh seat king looked at Lin Dong, who had remained standing despite his ferocious attacks. Then, the former involuntarily shook his head before he remarked. The murderous desire in his eyes grew richer after he spoke. However, just as he was about to attack, a sharp sword glow suddenly erupted from behind him. Although it was quite powerful, it was hardly able to hurt him. Hence, he merely smiled indifferently. Then he clenched his hand before he forcefully shattered that sword glow. With such puny strength, he laughed and ridiculed. However, before he could finish laughing, an alluring figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, a sharp long sword swiftly pierced towards him, just like a poisonous snake that had left its hole. You truly don't know your own limits. That long sword was covered by a mysterious layer of light. The seventh seat king's pupils shrunk right after he spoke. He was just about to pull back when he realized that the long sword had suddenly sped up. Then, it pierced through the crack on his Devil Emperor armor with lightning-like speed. Creak! The Devil Emperor armor, which could withstand an all-out attack from an expert who had passed one reincarnation tribulation, was now penetrated half an inch by that long sword. Promptly, black blood dripped from the tip of that long sword. You! The great pain radiating from his chest instantly caused the seventh seat king's expression to change drastically. He immediately threw a punch before Ling Qing Zhu's delicate figure flew backwards. Then, she spat out a mouthful of blood from under her veil, before her veil subsequently flew off. With a fearsome glint in his eyes, the seventh seat king stared at Ling Qing Zhu, who was sent flying by him. Promptly, killing desire gushed into his eyes. He clenched his fist, before viscous demonic aura erupted from his clenched fist like floodwaters. Finally, they streaked across the sky and ruthlessly smashed towards Ling Qing Zhu. When Ling Qing Zhu saw the attack from the seventh seat king, she gently bit her teeth. Tightening the grip over her long sword, she steeled herself to forcefully counter that attack. However, before she could make a move, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her in a phantom-like fashion. Subsequently, a low roar sounded before purple-gold dragon-like tattoos raced across the sky. Then, a fist forcefully smashed against the demonic aura torrent. Bang! The space crumbled. Lin Dong's body seemed to have suffered a heavy blow as he spurted a mouthful of blood. Meanwhile, his arm was slightly twisted and the terrible pain radiating from it caused cold sweat to drip off his forehead instantly. Lin Dong. Ling Qing Zhu was startled when she saw what Lin Dong did. Ha ha, what a touching scene. Since you wish to protect her, I shall kill her right in front of you. When the seventh seat king saw this scene, the smile on his lips became even more brutal. Then, his body flashed before he vanished in a peculiar fashion. Watch out! The instant the seventh seat king disappeared, Lin Dong's expression changed drastically. Then, he hurriedly grabbed Ling Qing Zhu. However, right after Lin Dong took her into his embrace, the seventh seat king had already appeared behind her. Then, an insidious laughter sounded before a palm attack filled with monstrous demonic aura mercilessly landed on Lin Dong's back. Blarg! Lin Dong sputtered out another mouthful of blood. With Ling Qing Zhu in his arms, his body swiftly fell from the sky. After which, the both of them landed heavily in the mountain forest. Ha ha! The seventh seat king was laughing heartily. Meanwhile, he was completely merciless when he attacked. Then, he beckoned with his hand before numerous demonic aura torrents were formed. Finally, they streaked across the sky with lightning-like speed before they smashed downwards in a ruthless fashion. In the mountain woods, Lin Dong was carrying Ling Qing Zhu while he dodged miserably. Nonetheless, he was still hurt by some aftershocks. Moreover, each time he was hit, he would use his back to forcefully block that attack, ensuring that Ling Qing Zhu, who was in his arms, did not suffer any injuries. Bang bang! That horrifying barrage of attacks caused the land beneath to crack. Lin Dong rolled aside. Currently, the flesh on his back was a complete mess. However, he forcefully endured the pain. Meanwhile, his body was trembling violently while the blood on the corner of his lips became denser. That darn bastard! Lin Dong inhaled a cold breath of air before he forcefully suppressed the giddy sensation within his mind. Meanwhile, he cursed out loud. Ling Qing Zhu looked at his face, which was in close proximity, before she clenched her teeth. The blood on his face made him look a little miserable. However, when she saw his current appearance, she involuntarily bit her lips. Meanwhile, her typically cold and collected eyes also became extremely gentle and even somewhat chaotic. "Why are you risking your life?" Ling Qing Zhu looked at the exceptionally miserable Lin Dong, who still caused her heart to flutter, before she bit her red lips and muttered, "If I can't even protect a woman, how can I call myself a man?" Lin Dong parted his lips and smiled, while his ragged breaths were blown onto Ling Qing Zhu's delicate face. Meanwhile, despite his formidable physical body, the intense pain radiating from within his body still caused cold sweat to continuously drip from his forehead. He had suffered serious injuries this time around. "You fool!" Ling Qing Zhu was a little absent-minded as she stared at Lin Dong. Soon after, some tears appeared in her eyes. Using her delicate hands to gently stroke his face, she ignored all the filth before she used her jade-like hands to gently wipe off the blood on the corner of his lips. Subsequently, she gently clenched her teeth, before a bewitching smile suddenly appeared on her gorgeous face, causing flowers to pale in comparison. "All of a sudden, I really want to teach you the zenith sensing art. What should I do?" When Lin Dong heard Ling Qing Zhu's sudden words, he was startled. Promptly, he laughed bitterly and said, "Now is not the ideal time to learn that zenith sensing art. Ling Qing Zhu clenched her teeth and asked, "Can you use some techniques to stop him for a while?" Lin Dong thought for a moment and said, "Though he is extremely powerful, it shouldn't be impossible for me to stop him for a while." After he spoke, Lin Dong clenched his hand. Then, a light formation quickly emerged on his palm. After which, it expanded with the wind and transformed into a giant light array, enveloping the entire mountain forest in the process. After the ancient universe formation was formed, Lin Dong tossed the great desolate tablet and the mysterious divine palace towards that formation and strengthened it. With their help, it was possible to completely stabilize that formation. Therefore, no matter how powerful the seventh seat king was, it was likely that he would need to spend some time in order to break that formation. However, the meridians within Lin Dong's body twitched after he set up that defensive formation. Immediately, there was more cold sweat on his forehead. Evidently, he was seriously injured and he even felt giddy in his mind. However, he forcefully suppressed it. After all, if he was to lose consciousness now, there was likely no way he could escape death. The ancient universe formation should be able to stop him for a while. However, it can merely delay him. Lin Dong panted as he looked at the ancient universe formation that enveloped the entire mountain forest. Currently, there was an extremely powerful energy surging on the formation, isolating the place from the outside world. "Don't worry, it's not so easy to kill me. If I am pushed to my limits, I will just make the ancient universe formation self-destruct. At that time, that fellow will also end up suffering." Lin Dong gritted his teeth and said. Although he would have to pay a high price to do so, he could not be bothered about it at this moment. Ling Qing Zhu shook her head. Then, she glanced at Lin Dong before her pretty face reddened. "Can you release me first?" Only now did Lin Dong realize that the both of them were lying in a far too intimate position. In fact, his entire body was lying above Ling Qing Zhu's delicate figure. Although the soft sensation that he felt could lead one's thoughts astray, now was not an appropriate moment. Therefore, he forcefully smiled and was just about to stand up, when the injuries on his body were once again triggered by his movements. Immediately, his body weakened before he crumbled on top of Ling Qing Zhu again. Ling Qing Zhu gasped softly after her body was pressed down by him. She tilted her head and saw Lin Dong clenching his teeth bitterly. Meanwhile, there was a pained expression on his face. When she saw the miserable expression on Lin Dong's face, a gentle emotion gradually surged into Ling Qing Zhu's eyes. She hesitated for a moment, before she used her hands to gently wipe off the perspiration on his forehead. "We must leave here first. I will make the ancient universe formation self-destruct later on. Carry me and go. The sky-devouring corpse will help us to stop him." Lin Dong approached Ling Qing Zhu's delicate ear, before he gritted his teeth and said. As he spoke, he could sense weariness setting in rapidly. he was going to suffer huge losses this time around. Not only was he going to lose the ancient universe formation, but it was also highly unlikely that he would lose the sky-devouring corpse. Other than the incident back at the unique Devil City, this was the only other time he suffered such a huge loss. However, Ling Qing Zhu gently shook her head after she heard his words. Then, she suddenly extended her small hand. Meanwhile, there was a dark red pill on her palm. "You, eat it." Ling Qing Zhu placed the pill into Lin Dong's mouth before she softly said, "Healing medicine?" Lin Dong was startled. Without hesitation, he swallowed that pill. Soon after, he felt that something was amiss. In fact, a strange fiery hot sensation surged the moment that pill entered his body. Furthermore, the giddy sensation within his mind intensified. In fact, he felt so giddy that his eyelids began to droop. What did you feed me?" Lin Dong muttered in a blurry state. "It's nothing. Everything will be fine once you wake up." Ling Qing Zhu used her delicate hands to stroke Lin Dong's face, before she softly bit her red lips and said. In his heart, Lin Dong vaguely felt that something was amiss. However, he was currently seriously injured. Therefore, as that feeble and fatigued sensation surged, it prevented him from awakening. Finally, his eyelids collapsed before his vision turned pitch black. Ling Qing Zhu looked at Lin Dong, who had fallen into a slumber. Meanwhile, her gorgeous face was completely fiery red. Then, she gently bit her silver teeth before she muttered softly, "The Zenith sensing art is a secret of our Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace that has never been passed to an outsider. Technically speaking, there is no training manual for it. It is just a profound and mysterious sensation. Moreover, its powerful strength originates from the sensing location. Furthermore, in order for you to sense that mysterious existence other than inheriting it at birth, the only other way is to do it through intercourse where both parties can sense it together." If Lin Dong was still awake at this moment, he would be bewildered by her words. After all, he never expected that such a method was required to learn the Zenith sensing art. It's no wonder Ling Qing Zhu was outraged when Lin Dong first mentioned this to her. It's actually because Ling Qing Zhu gently supported his body. After which, she bit her lips before she said, "The person hiding within his body, come out now." A light began to glimmer on the surface of Lin Dong's body. After which, Yang drifted out. When he saw the boiling red expression on Ling Qing Zhu's face, he involuntarily laughed dryly. However, there was an odd emotion within his eyes. "What you have given him to eat," Yang looked at Ling Qing Zhu and laughed dryly, "is it an aphrodisiac? This is the only way for him to learn the Zenith sensing art. Ling Qing Zhu lowered her eyes. Her face was as red as blood as she spoke. Yang was a little speechless at this moment. He finally understood that Ling Qing Zhu had likely thought of this scene when Lin Dong first mentioned that he wanted to learn the Zenith sensing art. It was also most likely why she asked Lin Dong to never mention this matter again. Clearly, she was struggling with it in her heart. Although she had a cold personality and appeared to be indifferent to everything, there was no way she could treat this matter in the same way. This was especially since the other party was Lin Dong. Therefore, she merely followed quietly beside him during this journey. Clearly, she was using this method to overcome certain obstacles in her heart and make up her mind. However, at the final moment, she still lacked the courage. Therefore, she decided to use this method, which left one neither able to laugh nor cry. After all, regardless of how cold a lady was, she would still be as timid and embarrassed as an ordinary girl when dealing with such matters. Yang sighed. Since Lin Dong was able to get this cool, haughty and intelligent girl to use such a stupid method, he could be considered as fairly capable. "Can I trouble you with something?" Ling Qing Zhu suddenly lifted her head, before she looked at Yang and asked. "What is it?" "Do not tell him about this." Ling Qing Zhu carefully rubbed off the blood on the corner of Lin Dong's lips, before she softly said. "Why?" Yang was startled. Clearly, he did not understand her thoughts. A girl like Ling Qing Zhu obviously viewed such matters with great importance. In fact, she typically wore a veil to conceal her appearance and it was difficult for an ordinary man to see her actual face. Moreover, her body was still pure and had only been touched once by Lin Dong in a complete accident. Therefore, it must have been difficult for her to make such a sacrifice. I do not want him to feel only guilt when he thinks of me. Ling Qing Zhu shook her head and said. Yang smiled bitterly and nodded. It seems like Ling Qing Zhu clearly understood why Lin Dong wanted to learn the zenith sensing art. Given his character, if he knew how much Ling Qing Zhu had to sacrifice in order for him to do so, it was likely that he would feel extremely guilty towards her. This was something that the haughty Ling Qing Zhu did not want to see. I will try my best to keep this secret. Thank you. Ling Qing Zhu smiled sweetly. The demeanor she displayed at this moment caused Yang to be startled. He quickly sighed before he drifted far away. Relationships between men and women were indeed troubling matters. When she saw that Yang had disappeared into the distance, Ling Qing Zhu finally used her icy cool hands to touch her own face. Then she turned to look at Lin Dong. After which, she waved her hand before a glow shot out from her sleeve. Soon after, it transformed into a sparkling bamboo house. This was clearly a soul treasure. However, other than hiding from the rain, it was of little use. Ling Qing Zhu gently carried Lin Dong as she walked into that bamboo house. Then, she carefully placed him on the bed. Ling Qing Zhu sat by the edge of the bed, before she stared at that familiar-looking face. When she first met him many years ago, his face was still a little tender and immature-looking. At that time, she had never imagined that she would end up doing something like this one day. If she knew, it was likely that she would have directly killed him on that mountain top with her sword. After which, she would no longer have anything to worry about. She looked at Lin Dong. A long while later, her gorgeous face became fiery red. Finally, she gently bit her lips before she slowly stood up. Her hands were trembling as she gently undid her waist wrap. Her snow-white dress fell. After which, a perfect and flawless naked body was exposed within this bamboo house. Meanwhile, her body was trembling gently and she looked so beautiful that it could mesmerize one's soul. You did this to me back then. Now, you deserve this. She glanced at the man on the bed. Currently, even though he had fainted, his body was still emitting great heat. As she recalled what happened in the past, as well as his blood-covered miserable face when he tried to protect her, she involuntarily laughed softly. Then, tears gathered in her eyes before they rolled down her face. Finally, she waved her hand, before the bamboo house darkened completely. However, there was the scent of lust blooming within the darkness. At this moment, lust caused one to lose track of time. The seventh-seat king stood in the sky pervaded by demonic chi. His expression was dark as he looked at the incomparably large ancient formation below and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. Ancient universe formation, this little fellow is really very surprising. He stared at the familiar ancient formation and laughed coldly. The strength of this formation was something he had personally tasted during those ancient times. However, the formation was in the hands of the symbol ancestor back then and countless Yimo had been killed by it. 5 kings, listen up, erode this formation. The seventh-seat king waved his hand and sneered. Although this ancient universe formation was well known, it was clear that Lin Dong had yet to obtain its true essence. Additionally, the latter was far weaker than the symbol ancestor. Hence, what was there for him to fear? Understood. The 5 Yimo kings maintaining the demonic chi light barrier in the sky immediately cried out in unison. After which, demonic chi seemed to cover the sky and land as it surged from the demonic chi light barrier and landed on the ancient universe formation. Demonic chi rippled. Although it was constantly purified by the power of the ancient universe formation, even more demonic chi surged over, unceasingly exhausting the power of the ancient universe formation. The seventh-seat king sat down in the sky as a cold look was revealed in his eyes. Lin Dong's performance was extraordinary, causing the murderous intent within his heart to grow. He could already sense just how troublesome Lin Dong was after exchanging blows today. If the latter was allowed to continue growing, it was likely that he would be just as difficult to deal with as the 8 ancient masters. It was best to finish off such a potential enemy as soon as possible. With these thoughts in mind, the seventh seat king's eyes became even more sinister as he looked at the ancient universe formation. Let me see just how long this ancient universe formation of yours can last. Lin Dong's consciousness seemed to be drifting endlessly within the haziness. His consciousness was extremely blurry. However, he could occasionally feel an indescribable softness. His consciousness was as weak as a baby's. While he drifted within the haziness, it vaguely felt as though there was a gentle consciousness coiling around him and protecting him. This feeling was extremely pleasant. Due to this pleasant, his consciousness also began to approach and entangle with it. Passionate heat rushed past and his body seemed to move. It was possible for him to vaguely hear a soft moan from a lady as she bit her red lips. Lin Dong's consciousness continued to drift. Suddenly, a hazy light appeared in the distance. This light seemed to be the light of primal chaos, something that was born when the world began. His consciousness paused and no longer advanced when it was still some distance from the primal chaos. The light caused his consciousness to feel waves of piercing pain and he did not dare to approach. The gentle consciousness gently wrapped around him while he helplessly paced back and forth. It was just like a hand that slowly pulled him as they approached the primal chaos. However, this light clearly possessed damaging properties towards the gentle consciousness. Yet, she continued to tightly wrap around his consciousness as it rippled, preventing him from being hurt by the piercing pain. However, Lin Dong's blurry consciousness could still sense the pain that she endured. Soon after, an indescribable emotion surged. His consciousness suddenly swelled and ended up wrapping around that gentle consciousness. A lady appeared to release a faint cry as his consciousness violently entered her body. After which, the two consciousness charged into the primal chaos. An indescribably unique feeling was quietly being born. That feeling was as though they were above a certain world. Time slowly flowed by. A feeling of extreme freeness surged out from his consciousness like floodwaters. Finally, the blurry consciousness slowly began to awaken. A lush green mountain forest appeared within Lin Dong's sights when he opened his eyes again. He lay on the ground and lifted his head slightly, only to see violent fluctuations on the large formation. There was still a faint feeling of dizziness in his head. Lin Dong swung his head from side to side and tossed this feeling aside. After which, he sat up. His pitch-black eyes were still a little dazed. "You've awoken." A gentle voice was transmitted from in front of Lin Dong. He lifted his head and saw Ling Qing Zhu standing nearby. A pair of clear eyes were quietly looking at him. Her face was still covered by a veil, while her lovely and well-proportioned figure revealed a seemingly perfect outline under her white dress. Her originally tied-up black hair was currently scattered and landed behind her perky bottom like a waterfall. She seemed to emit a languid aura for some unknown reason. This aura caused Lin Dong's recently awoken heart to pound. "You've changed?" Lin Dong involuntarily asked when he looked at Ling Qing Zhu. "What change?" Ling Qing Zhu walked over and squatted in front of Lin Dong. Her usually cool and clear eyes contained a faint smile. "You have become even more beautiful," Lin Dong smilingly said. He felt a little surprise when he looked at Ling Qing Zhu. The latter seldom took the initiative to do something so intimate even if the other party was him. Lin Dong's words were right. He did not know why, but the current Ling Qing Zhu had a soul-stirring beauty. It was not merely external beauty. Instead, it was a beauty that arose from her demeanor. Ling Qing Zhu merely smiled faintly in response to his flattery and softly said, "Stop looking. The ancient universe formation is about to reach its limit. You should think of a way to escape this predicament." Lin Dong suddenly recovered after hearing these words. He raised his head to look at the violently shaking ancient universe formation and hastily got to his feet. However, he quickly felt that something was amiss. "My injuries?" Lin Dong's face was filled with surprise. He discovered that the injuries which had appeared in his body after exchanging blows with the seventh seat king had made a full recovery. Even the yuan power that had been exhausted earlier had completely recovered. "Is this because of the medicinal pill you gave me?" Lin Dong looked at Ling Qing Zhu. He still vaguely recalled Ling Qing Zhu giving him something to eat just before he became unconscious. Ling Qing Zhu shifted her eyes aside and said, I have already taught you the zenith sensing art. Ah? Lin Dong was once again startled. When did this happen? Calm your heart and you will naturally be able to feel it. However, this is all I can do for you. The level you reach in this zenith sensing art will be entirely dependent on yourself. Ling Qing Zhu stood up and said. Lin Dong frowned. He also stood up and looked at Ling Qing Zhu. Did something happen while I was unconscious? This zenith sensing art? Ling Qing Zhu shook her head and said, You have promised me not to mention the zenith sensing art. Since you have already succeeded in learning it, can you please not ask about it? Lin Dong looked at Ling Qing Zhu's slightly lowered eyes. He was silent for a moment, before he smiled bitterly and nodded. You should first try and feel the zenith sensing art. It will naturally be best if we can escape from the current situation. Ling Qing Zhu turned her head away and softly said. After which, she walked towards a mountain slope. Her pretty eyes were worried as she peered into the distance, while her face appeared absent-minded. Lin Dong looked at the fair and soft figure. A breeze blew over and her ink-like hair danced in the wind. He felt a little terrible in his heart for some unknown reason. Lin Dong shook his head with all his might and gradually calmed the emotions in his heart. After which, he shut his eyes and sensed the mysterious thing which had appeared in his consciousness. It was not something that had substance or form. Instead, it was a kind of ethereal and illusionary. There seemed to be a kind of strange energy stealthily surging over from that mysterious spot when he touched it. What exactly is this? Lin Dong's was at a complete loss. The shaking of the ancient universe formation grew increasingly violently in the sky. It was vaguely possible to sense the monstrous demonic qi outside. The ancient universe formation was clearly unable to endure the erosion of the 5 Yimo kings. A buzzing sound finally spread in the sky. After which, the huge ancient universe formation suddenly dimmed. The light weakened and it turned into a flash of light that fell from the sky and entered Lin Dong's body. The great desolate tablet and the mysterious divine palace also returned after the ancient universe formation did so. From the looks of it, it was obvious that they had exhausted a great amount of their energy. The entire mountain forest was completely exposed to the monstrous demonic qi after the ancient universe formation was defeated. The 7th seed king was seated in the air within the demonic qi sea. Those sinister eyes of his indifferently looked at the Lin Dong duo, who had once again appeared in his sights. Ha ha, it looks like the both of you will not be able to escape death today. The 7th seed king slowly stood up. He looked at Lin Dong as ferocity slowly rose from the corner of his lips. Lin Dong's tightly shut eyes gradually opened at this moment. Those pitch-black eyes of his were completely undisturbed. There was not even the slightest trace of panic in the face of this desperate situation. The 7th seed king looked at the calm-looking Lin Dong and frowned. He felt a little uneasy for some unknown reason. However, he quickly shrugged off this feeling. Less than an hour had passed. How could Lin Dong give him such a feeling from out of the blue? Next, the both of you should become a pair of dead lovebirds. The 7th seed king extended his hand as extremely frightening demonic qi gathered in his palm. Lin Dong's eyes remained calm. In the next moment, his body had already appeared in front of Ling Qing Zhu as he softly said, "Stay behind me. You can be rest assured that since I have brought you out, I will definitely bring you back." Ling Qing Zhu looked at this skinny figure in front of her and bit her red lips. There was a faint gentleness surging deep within her eyes as she softly acknowledged with a rarely seen gentleness. Lin Dong lifted his head as his tightly clenched hand slowly relaxed. An extremely sharp fluctuation erupted from within his pitch-black eyes. This video will end here.